Hello? Good. Hello, and welcome to the last session today, well, the last formal session. After this, from 5 until 7:30, we have a social event. We have some free nibbles. There's a cash-only bar. By all means, stick around. Continue all the great conversations you've been having today about continuous delivery. For this last half an hour, we have a discussion panel. It's a slightly different format to last year. It is not solely a speaker panel. The reason that we have these two lovely speakers here is that they have been warned in advance of what is to come. So the format is that we have 4 people up here. We have 1 question selected by me from the audience. Each person answers the question using this. Why am I holding the microphone on the lapel mic? What am I doing? They will use this as their token. In fact, I'll give you the token now, Linda. There you go. I just remembered I had a lapel mic on as well as a handset, so I don't need both. And I was holding the token. Okay, so there will be 1 question that 4 people will answer, then 1 speaker will leave, and someone else comes up. And whoever comes up can be anyone. It can be an attendee, a speaker, a sponsor, one of our fine video crew, our audio guy, Andy, if he wishes to come up. I'm not fussed at all. So now that people know the format, could I have 2 people volunteer to come up and answer the first question, please? Really? Commitment, not compliance. Thank you. Because it was going to be compliance. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so who has the first question for the current panel? Hi there.
Obviously, targeted slightly Linda, but please, everybody, what's your current major personal fear of change in organisations?
Okay, so the question is, what's your current personal
Fear of change
in organisations?
Well, I actually fear that we're not going to change and meet the challenges that are kind of facing us. I fear that we're not going to adapt to being able to release early and often, and I fear that we're not going to be able to meet the security requirements that our customers have about the hosting that we're providing to them, by the fact that we're not able to get our releases into production whenever there's a heartbleed or other kind of thing like that. So I'm actually a lot more afraid of not being able to change than I'm afraid of change itself.
Okay, that's a very good answer.
I needed some more time to think about this.
Yeah, I don't know how you follow that answer, actually.
Yeah, I'll think about this.
Yeah, okay.
I need some more time to think about this as well. Should we get beer? So first, I'm an independent consultant. So I don't have a production environment anymore. I think one of the things generally that that kind of concerns me is being too gung ho. I think that we need to be cautious about change. I kind of agree with the things that is it Mary was saying in her presentation earlier today, that the people that tend to guard the gates to production are probably right. We screw up very often and we do bad things, and we should be cautious. So I believe very, very much in de-risking things by frequent release and high levels of automation to give us high degrees of confidence in the things that we're going to release. But I also believe we're doing that cautiously and proceeding in a sensible manner so that we don't scare the hell out of people, and particularly the business, because we've broken their trust and we need to recover it. So my fear is not just... I have a friend who worked in an organisation and they decided that they were going to do continuous delivery without any automated tests. So they're just releasing into production all the time. And it strangely kind of works for them, but scares the hell out of me. And I wouldn't do that in any of the sorts of organisations that I tend to work in, where there's generally more money involved in the transactions that are going on, because that would be irresponsible. So I'm fear of that kind of change.
Okay, I think I've come up with something now. I think I'm afraid about the change that we've just made. We had like one big team of like 15 developers, and it was too big. So we split it up, and now we have like we hired some people as well. We have not like 5 teams, and one of them's only got 2 people in it, and I'm worried that we're just not going to get anything done. because it's all two small teams, and each team has a different task to work on. They're not going to talk to each other. We're going to deliver less than we did before. That's my current fear.
Okay. Thank you. And now Linda has to have an answer.
So I live in the United States of America, and and my biggest fear is that we're not going to change. So I'm going to steal a little bit from you, and that I believe we have good intentions, but that we make too many mistakes, and we don't seem to be learning from them. So I see a lot of organizations that are trying to change too fast or do things that are a little risky. And I think that's okay, actually. What's missing, and the thing that I'm afraid of, is that we don't learn from the past and we're not learning from our failures.
Okay, thank you. So if one person could leave the panel? Linda, can we have one more person join while I search for a question? Okay, thank you. And can we have a question, please? Really? Okay, hello.
So I'd like to pick up on a point that Linda made in her presentation this morning, which is that in Agile there's no science, there's no randomised controlled experiment. And I'd like to ask the panel why this might be. Is it something we benefit? And if is it something that we benefit from having? And if so, how would you kind of bring it in?
Okay, so the question was, why do we have no randomized controlled experiments in Agile, and would we benefit from them? And if so, how would we go about doing it?
Well, I know this isn't a popular point of view, but I beg to differ, because I do have one counter-example of when I went to university about 9 years ago, of my final year project being monitored by a postgraduate student who was measuring teams that chose to use a waterfall methodology versus teams that chose to use an agile methodology. Of course, my team chose waterfall and we failed spectacularly. But so there obviously are some people out there, but maybe they're just not well known enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've met some researchers who are doing research into computer science and issues, and I met a team of researchers. They actually had a big enough budget that they could pay for the same system to be built by 4 different teams that they paid to build the same system. And they could measure every aspect of their development process and how many bugs they found and how quick they fixed them and then how well the system performed in production. And as far as I know, they're still doing the experiment and gathering the data. So there are people doing this kind of thing. But it costs an awful lot of money to do research in our branch. And a lot of the research is done on students who are not all that good analogy for professional developers a lot of the time.
You're sat next to one. Okay.
Sorry. Students are great, but they're not the same as developers with 10, 15 years experience.
That's a good save. Okay.
Yeah.
Next answer.
So I think there is some research going on. It's not very much of it. We don't hear about it, and a lot of it's done on students, and it's not very relevant. But there is some.
So I would ask whether or not doing scientific research into, because they are all project management techniques, is actually that interesting and relevant, and whether or not the kind of cost-benefit ratio of if we did do science on that kind of stuff would actually tell us anything we didn't already know, or whether or not, as Linda said this morning, the science and the facts that might come out of research will actually convince anyone to change their ways, because we all emotionally believe that Agile works and it's great, and we all love Scrum, except we now love Kanban, and maybe we're going to love what comes after Kanban very shortly. And I think probably the more interesting question is what science can we bring to software development if we want to kind of, or software engineering if we want to talk about it as an engineering discipline, not just kind of Agile and project management and that kind of stuff.
I'm going to disagree with nearly everybody now. So I disagree with the panel. I agree mostly with Linda and slightly disagree with some of what she says. So
Yes, of course. Go on.
So one of my hobbies is that I'm a popular science nerd, and I'm in love with physics. I think physics is the king of science, and basically everything else is homeopathy. So So on that basis, there is no these silly studies that are carried out on
Whoa.
projects. They're not. There's no control. You can't measure my software project against yours. The people will be different. The technology will be different. The environment will be different. The requirements will be different. There are too many variables. There are no real controls, and therefore there's no real mechanism. Where I disagree is that I do think there's science, and I think, as actually Linda pointed out in her presentation, science in many ways, with 2020 hindsight, is at the heart of what makes agile disciplines work. What really works, so we are way more stupid than we think we are as a species. We are very, very poor at predicting the future. And so what really works is that we should extrapolate our understanding just a little bit further than what we understand. We should figure out what an experiment to carry out to figure out whether we're right or wrong. We should carry out the experiment and we should reflect on the results. And most of the time when we do that, all of the time when we do that, we only really learn when the experiments go wrong. Being experimental is being scientific. The scientific method is what matters about science, more than, in my opinion, more than anything else. So we can approach software development in an experimental way. We can look for ways to make the work that we do falsifiable. So I think of automated testing as the falsifiability of the systems that we build. We can't prove that our systems are right any more than we can prove that quantum theory is correct. But we can make predictions that are falsifiable, and we can make tests that are falsifiable. And I think that's important. I think that's really valuable, and I think it's useful. The social science experiments that are carried out, collecting surveys of data and doing a statistical analysis of whether waterfall is better than agile, I kind of take with a pinch of salt. I kind of use in my presentations to justify my personal biases. And they have some use, they have some utility, they have some value. But I don't think it's a real measure. It's not a real scientific measure. I think that being experimental and looking for falsifiability in the work that we do is a real thing that we can really do. And when we do, we get better results.
Okay, so there's an important tip there. If you're writing a presentation, you find some data online that's kind of what you're looking for, and you just chuck it in.
Doing over code than over process, though. So I think code, we're very good at identifying something that we expect to fail. But the classic example is retrospectives. The few retrospectives that actually identify actions, how many of them identify an action that we're going to try and say how we're going to measure whether it works and actually review that later on?
I don't want to hog the microphone, but I recommend that everybody in the room goes and looks at the work of Mike Ruther and the Toyota Carta and mechanisms for learning. That's about doing exactly what you're saying, but for anything, for process, whatever.
Dave,
it's about designing experiments.
That's enough.
Sorry, Steve.
Don't ask David. Don't ask David about science. Okay, can we have one person? Okay, bye, Dave. Can we have one person join, please? We're waving at someone. Are we waving at Alex? No. Phil, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay, question here. Yes, Alex.
What, in your opinion, I don't know how many of you were here last year. Okay. I know. I wanted to ask you. Have any of your opinions about continuous delivery changed between last year's pipeline?
That's a very good question. Okay, so the question is, have any opinions about continuous delivery changed for you over the past year?
Okay, so 12 months ago, I was started being part of the continuous delivery change program at the BBC, and I thought continuous delivery was continuous deployment, and now I know that it's not. And continuous delivery is really all about not only the technical mechanisms of how do you improve your code delivery pipeline to get things through to live as smoothly as possible and smooth that out. It's also about how do you bring around change in the organisation. So how do you bring the business on board with the idea that we can make things smaller, we can deliver things quicker, but we can only deliver things quicker if they're smaller. And also the idea that you don't have to have everything at once. You can have lots of things quite small. So I think that's what I've realised more about continuous delivery is how it fits into the wider picture of how we deliver software, not just the technical practices.
Good answer.
I think I've learnt a lot more about incremental and iterative change, and that continuous delivery can enable you to put out a product incrementally, And from a technical point of view, that's a good thing because you're reducing risk and small releases, and that's great. But that you get an additional benefit if you can get the business to also let you develop iteratively, so that you can push out changes as well, so that you're not just delivering parts of a fixed backlog. The backlog changes as you deliver stuff, as they learn what they want more. So that's kind of what I've been learning about it lately.
Cool, thank you.
After the past year, and especially Linda's talk, I'm less naively optimistic that people in my company agree with me if I'm rational in my arguments.
Yes, you can't fight crazy.
I think anecdotally, my observations from being here last year to this year are that the demographic of the audience has changed massively. I think last year it was really DevOps heavy with some developers and some QAs that obviously had quite DevOps sort of interest, whereas I think this year, from people I've spoken to, there's a much wider variety of disciplines that are here. So I think continuous delivery is definitely, I think a lot of people had the continuous delivery equals continuous deployment sort of equals DevOps, and I think that's been expanding this year in all of sort of the forums and things that I've seen, and people are recognising it as being an end-to-end software. So it's continuous delivery isn't a part of software delivery, it is the whole process of software delivery, from sort of early demand shaping all the way through to kind of DevOps and things like actively deleting features they're not using. It's the whole cycle, and that's, my opinion, certainly been moving pretty quickly in that direction, but I think I'm seeing that change in the community as well.
Okay, great. Okay, that's everyone. Okay, so can someone leave? Thank you, sir. And once you've read all of that stuff, then you'll read Black Swan Farming, or you'll read Don Reinertson's book, and you'll realise that the pipeline's even bigger than that. Can we have one more person? No, we're going in a different direction. Anyone joining? Thank you. And do we have a question? Hello, yes.
How often do you meet organizations, let's say, that follow certain patterns or practices, but they completely miss the points of the pattern or practice they were supposed to follow?
Okay, so how often do you see or visit an organization where they are trying to apply patterns or practices of continuous delivery and they get it very badly wrong?
It's easier to answer the opposite question, which is how often don't you see organisations? So I think everybody does, and I think we all probably do to a certain degree. I think quite often when you learn about something, you kind of see something that I guess on the adoption curve that Linda was talking about, you see something that interests you and there's just enough there that's cool, but you don't really get the values of it. So, you pick something out which isn't really the defining factor. I think a lot of organisations, we were talking before about, just things like, agile adoption and things, and people saying, well, how do we make sure that people start doing agile? It's, well, if you're trying to make people start doing agile, you're probably missing some of the point. And I think continuous delivery is exactly the same. People are trying to pick up micro techniques of continuous delivery and measuring the wrong thing. So I think a lot it's happening, particularly in bigger organisations. I see it happening more, but it's just because they're potentially laggards on the curve from an organisational perspective.
You've got the wrong sort of cookies.
Yeah. Or biscuits, please. We talked about language.
So I'm not sure. So obviously I'm not a consultant or anything like that. I only work in one organisation. So I'm not sure how often I see teams getting it disastrously wrong. Certainly internally, I see teams that are on different stages between the old world of a change advisory board and that kind of stuff, and the fully. I don't think I'd say I've seen any team certainly internally that have a completely perfectly slick CD pipeline, but I've not seen any teams that have gone completely the wrong direction. They're kind of all in between, and that maybe probably speaks testaments to our internal continuous delivery champions. But I think generally developers are on board, and once you kind of get the product, and once you kind of get the evangelism and the business people start coming on board, it takes them a little while to get their heads around to it, but when they do, they're there. So I think it's just people are somewhere along the spectrum rather than saying people are going wrong.
In my days as a consultant, I've talked to a lot of teams about test-driven development, which is smaller than continuous delivery, but I know more about it. So I meet a lot of teams who are writing a lot of unit tests, and some of those are awful, and also teams that aren't homogenous. You meet a team of developers and you find one or two of them are really actually very good at writing unit tests, and some of them are absolutely terrible. So I don't think you can kind of, I don't want to make generalizations, but there's a wide spectrum of how much people have understood what it is they're supposed to do and how much skills they've got. That's not an answer.
So I feel a bit of on the back foot here because I've had literally one job in my life and it's this one. And so I've only ever known the way we do things, and I would say we do continuous delivery. But what's more interesting to me, I think, is that even though I've not talked to anyone who claims to be doing continuous delivery and just adhering to some rituals, how people who claim they are doing it differently and still finding it effective. So things that work for us probably wouldn't work at other places and vice versa. And I think to me, it's more important that the values of continuous delivery are being embedded and the implementation is less of a thing.
Should we give an example? So Alex gave a talk today about testing in production. I can definitely imagine some clients a year from now that are going to call me and say, we've been testing in production and we're having problems with our user data. All of a sudden, like that could happen. Someone could have watched your talk today and now they're going to be like, hey, we need to test in production.
So I think we should start prefixing all of our talks with caveats as this works for us, may not work for you. But I mean, even within our own organisation, we have teams that do CD but do it in different ways. So some teams, even though it's an implementation detail, some teams use a CI server. Our team chooses not to, but we're both doing that, delivering value, getting feedback quickly, and if it works, it works.
Okay. I'm going to resist the urge to answer the question myself, although it's quite hard. Okay, can one person leave, please? Thank you very much. And next question. We've got time for maybe 2, maybe 3 questions. Hello.
So we talk about continuous journey and not a destination.
Oh, what happened? Are we empty chairing someone? Is someone not turning up? Didn't I? No, not me. Can someone join? Thank you. Thank you. I don't know what happened then. I must be thinking of the TV debates and just, we'll do without that. We'll do without that one guy. Yes, hello again.
Continuous journey and not a destination. Yeah. So what do you guys think is the most important place to start if you're trying to implement continuous delivery in an organisation that doesn't already do it?
The panel, not me. Dave, no.
I'm going to pass this one on.
So I'm in a situation where that's exactly what I'm doing, having been at other organisations and implemented continuous delivery. And from my view, where you've got to start is culture. And probably the hardest thing is for people to get into the mindset that this can actually be a sane thing to possibly do. And particularly there's a good example around things like QAs who fear for their lives that they won't make a mistake and screw everything up for everybody else. And when you're making a release, and the release process is so hard, you just, as a habit, build things up to make it big so that it makes it worthwhile to do a complete regression over the entire stack. And the idea of doing a smaller release and not regression testing the whole thing because you don't have the automated test to do it is just a huge fear. And it's particularly the case when it's like, well, that's the QA's role and this is the developer's role. And the team isn't working together and appreciating this is our problem that we've got to solve together. And this, I think most of these things like DevOps, like continuous delivery, Agile, they're all culture, and that's really where you've got to start. And don't use excuses like, well, we don't have the tools, we don't have the tests. The old XP mantra, if it hurts, do it more, is the thing there. Because particularly, you've got a painful release process, you just got to keep doing it harder and harder and identifying what the difficult things are and then go from there. And it just does take a long time. But once you've got a team that's really engaged and is all together around this being a goal that we share, then you will get there.
Thank you. So now, that was such a good answer on culture. Can we not have any more answers on culture, please? Because that's what everyone's going to say.
So,
except me and Dave.
We started deploying continuous delivery by changing our dev team. So I'll tell you how we did it, and I'll tell you how I'd do it if I'm doing it again. So we did it by automating our deployments and standardized them across environments. So we now have the first thing we had was a script that when you took one argument, which was the environment to deploy to, when you ran it, deployed it. And that's how we started it. So we started in the dev team and we kind of moved out and spread the culture from there. If I was doing it again, the first thing I'd do is actually make sure I have a written checklist of what our release process actually was. Because writing the automation is like, we've automated our deploys, great. And then we realized that actually testing was part of our deploy process. We'd only considered it as like code promotions and config deployments, environmental configs and stuff like that. And actually, what we should have done is actually written down what our release process was and then started automating that rather than what we as devs thought our release process was.
Good answer, thank you.
So I think obviously there's culture. Okay, I won't do that, Steve. I think there's two different approaches typically for change, which is kind of bottom up and top down, which obviously is dumbing things down a bit. But I think in terms of top down, where there's people who determine that they want change, then I think it's actually about, it's not about changing the culture, it's about changing their opinions on what is risk and how risk is managed, because I think that's one of the main things. Obviously, there were talks there about security and everything else. And I think the bottom-up approach can really help that. So obviously, Mary was talking about making things good first. So the common misconception that I see in continuous delivery is that people think it's got anything to do with how frequently you release, and it hasn't. Continuous delivery has nothing to do with how frequently you release. It really has to do with the fact that you are not, the delivery team and the software is not the bottleneck. So if the customer wants to release once a year,
Correct.
and that's able to provide enough feedback for the business, then that can be continuous delivery. So don't try and increase the speed of delivery or the frequency of release as the first thing you do. Talk about improving the quality, which really means verification and automation. But I would share this, which a precursor to automation. Who is it that said something, write the thing, document things, then automate things? Is it Jez or somebody's? I can't think of what
and
the quote is.
Dan North did a talk a couple of years ago about informed decisions,
Dan.
and when you automate something, you're trading away the ability to modify stuff if you need to.
Yeah. So reproduce the thing and then automate the thing, and I think a way of reproducing it is to make sure that you understand what it is you're currently doing.
I would say continuous delivery is about matching the speed of technical delivery with the speed of business delivery, and that might be
So I guess I'm going to kind of take this and look at it a bit the other way. So sometimes we've found ourselves drifting away from continuous delivery, like we have been found ourselves in situations where the temptation to say deploying this change is too risky, let's not do it, let's wait a bit and do a bit more, feel a bit more secure about it. And I think the way we've been tackling that is we just have to basically sit down, write down what it is we're scared of. So what are we scared of breaking, and then realizing that by actually doing this continuous delivery, it could be deploying frequently or running our tests more frequently, but that will alleviate our fears, and putting it off won't actually make it any better. You're just deferring the problem.
Okay. All right. This panel's a shambles. Really?
Yes.
About what? I wanted to answer the one earlier. Get continuous integration fixed. Is Ivan here? Where's Ivan? Oh, he bailed out. Okay, so Ivan gave a talk today about building pipelines. Start with continuous integration, get that fixed, because it won't work properly yet.
So I wanted to add on this because the more I've seen of this, the more that I believe that if you just focus on cycle time, and you honestly focus on cycle time, and you do whatever reducing your cycle time tells you to do, all of the rest of it falls out. All of the agile process, the lean approach, the experimental process, the high level of automation falls out. Now, it's a hard way to do it, but I do think that's the starting point. So do a value stream analysis, look at where your problems really are, and start addressing those problems, whether it's, so in some organizations it's team structure or organizational technology, deployment automation, testing. It could be any of those things, which is the best place to start, in my opinion. But the cycle time will tell, by measuring cycle time and looking to optimize that, it will tell you, and all of the rest falls out as second order effects.
Yeah, so the correct answer, I guess, is, I don't need that. Why do I need that? I've got a lapel mic. Yes, I guess the correct answer is, what is your current cycle time? Find that out. How long does it take to actually do something on average? Not one release, on average. Okay, we have time for one more question, apparently, according to the moderator. Hi.
Talking about automation, do you think there is any future in using artificial intelligence in software testing?
No. I saw Terminator 2 when I was a young boy.
Like when you say artificial intelligence in regards to automation, what sort of things do you have in
Are
mind?
you giving an "it depends" answer? I thought you weren't a consultant. What are you thinking?
No, but what did you have in mind?
Well, introducing changes to software means that you have to change the tests as well, and you have to, obviously, as a human, you know what has changed, and you have to translate that into the code, into the test suite. But it would be nice if there would be like a way of adaptable test suite, let's say.
Oh, okay, so there is one thing. Do you know about IMVU?
So what? So like
Say IMVU. That's the answer.
What's IMVU?
There's like IMVU. They're this company in America that continuous deployment, and they have like a cluster immune system that kind of does it.
Oh.
You can say that.
Yeah, that. What?
Steve speaks for all panelists.
This is why it's not me.
So I guess the question is, depends what you define as AI. So I studied natural language processing at university. So you know there is scope for probably using that to like parse your dates or something to make sure that it's human readable. So it's technically AI, but I think generally I certainly would find it hard to imagine justifying to my managers that, oh yeah, the AI is doing the testing for us, we can trust it. I think the only kind of interesting scenarios is like it's probably not AI, but it's like there's an Android library where it like simulates loads of taps on the screen and makes sure that the app doesn't crash and things like that. That's maybe AI, but that's probably just randomized user input testing really. So the answer is probably not, in my opinion.
I think there's a long way to go before it becomes particularly useful. I think at the moment testing is mainly example-based, which is really good for driving out design, but things like property-based testing as well as kind of fuzz-based testing in the security area and sort of more parallelization and sort of running more bulk tests is probably something that will be more useful, which most people don't do before we get to genuine sort of artificial intelligence and testing.
Okay. Do you want to give a proper answer?
No,
You sure?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Oh, we got one more person apparently. Okay.
Well, no, so I'm from an AI background, and I'd argue we are already using it. So if you look at what a lot of security and integrity tests are doing, they're using machine intelligence. They're using a lot of the probably 10 years ago what the main developments were then, but we're not necessarily aware of it. So a lot of us are paying for pen testing and security testing and similar, and not realizing that a robot's doing it, not a person. But it's still valid and useful, but they won't tell us that that's what they're doing because then they have to charge a bit less.
Okay, so I think that's just over half an hour. So this isn't the end of the conversation by any means. The panel members, myself, everyone is sticking around for a while, hopefully. So we have a couple of things to do left yet. We have the giveaway for one of the earlier sponsored lightning talks. We then have a copy of Linda's book. So Linda's going to choose the question for the panel that she found the most interesting. We have the social event here on site until 7:30. And then we have the London Continuous Delivery Meetup group, which is meeting in the White Swan pub across the road. So when you come out of the doors of the building, you take a left and it's right in front of you. So should we do the sponsor giveaway first of all? We have a microphone, that's useful.
Okay, thanks very much. Before I start, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Steve, Matthew, Chris, the whole crew. I think the Pipeline's been a fantastic conference this year, so congratulations, well done. So, Linda, would you mind picking a name for me? Honestly, nice. It's all above board, nothing to do with me. Thank you very much. And the winner is Sean Bedford, Masabi. At the back there.
Very good.
Yeah, somebody's new. Everybody's new best friend.
And let's see, we had...
Oh, perfect. Send us some pictures.
And yes, one more thing. The copy of Linda's brand new book, which I think I already have on ebook, so I'm not going to try and steal this. Which question do you like the most from the panel? Science. The one about science? Yes. The one that got Dave so animated. Okay, there we go. Very good. There you go, sir. Thank you. Right. I'm done? Right, I'm going to hide.
So just very quickly then, wrapping up. It's working? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Practical things first. Please leave your lanyard. Take your badge if you want. Actually, no. Just leave the whole thing. Leave the badge, lanyard, holder, everything. Unless you really, 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 really want it. In that case, that's fine. But please take T-shirts and bags. There's still some more T-shirts outside there. Please take them away because otherwise we have to cart them back home and store them somewhere. So take one for your friends or for your partner or your kids or whatever is appropriate. That would be really useful. the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who I've spoken to about video interviews, please meet just by the registration desk after this session. I'd like to thank, on behalf of the organising team, many people today. Obviously, first off, Linda Rising for an amazing keynote talk. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the speakers as well. Again, as it happened, we had a bit of an overlap between the organisations that the speakers came from and some of the sponsors. But as you'll be aware, the way in which we chose the talks, as last year, was through blind selection. So the fact that there's an overlap there is a coincidence. The talks were chosen on the basis of the proposal and the wording that was sent through. Who put your hand up if you've learned something new today? Put the other hand up if you've learned a second new thing today. Great, that's good. So yeah, let's just give a round of applause to all the speakers. So thanks to you, everyone here, for attending as well, because I think one of the great things about an event like this is the sort of interactions we have in the coffee break, on the Twitter wall, that kind of thing. That's been really, really awesome. So give yourselves a round of applause. Thanks again to the sponsors. Thanks to Etc. Venues for doing a really great job. The food was excellent, I think, and the staff and so on have been really, really helpful, so that's been really great. The Wi-Fi from Digital Avenue, I think, has been good today. Video, team, photography, and audio. So thank you to all the people who kind of, the operations side of this kind of thing, right? Okay. And I'd like to just say a very personal thanks to all the people in the grey T-shirts for pulling this event together. It's been a bit of a journey, but I think it's paid off. So thank you very much. And second, yes, in your bag that you received at the beginning of the day, you should have a feedback form, an A4 feedback form. Please fill it out and give it back to us. We've heard a fair amount about the importance of measuring and feedback, so please be part of that loop and hand those in on the registration desk before you leave today. That would be really great. We are going to do another post-it note voting, pink, yellow, green thing for the panel session just now. So if you've still got some of those left, we've got boxes by the door. We have drinks and nibbles here until 7:30 at the latest, but there will be food at the White Swan from 7. So there'll be a sort of things will start to move from here into the pub. Say again? Blue-green, yeah, we'll do blue-green on. Yeah, okay, great. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. See you next year.